Hey everybody and welcome. So I wanted to make a video of my Goal Zero Yeti 150 and also tell you guys a few things that I've been looking at, researching that. It seems like Goal Zero decided to release the lithium versions, and it's quite cool. I mean, it's nice that they're going lithium, but there are still not as much advantages to the lithium power sources than there are to the AMG versions. The AMG versions, if you go from the 150 to the 400 and the 1250, then you might as well keep with the AMG versions because, one, the advantages to the AMG version is chainable ability, and the price of it is less than what you would pay for the lithium version. I mean, if you want to pay for the same money as the lithium version, you can get twice as much power than the lithium version by far, because you can buy 2 extra batteries for the 400 or even for the 1250 and be on the same comparison to pricing wise as the lithium version itself that will have less power. Not to mention the more power output of the DC ports is on the AMG versions versus the lithium versions. If you look on the 400, you have 3 DC ports on the AMG, but the lithium version, you only have 2. I mean, sure, you have an extra port for USB, but yeah. Unless you're planning to use a lot of AC power, which is mainly for surge ability, the 400 lithium will give you that ability, but I mean, you're only getting 600 more surge. I mean, most of the time for 400 lithium, you're not really going to be using a lot of that surge power, so it's really not necessary. So AMG is pretty much the golden ability to go because you have more DC power, and supposedly these plugs are actually individual plugs, so they're not tied together. So the DC ports give 120 watts of power per port. So the 400 will give you 360 watts of power performance from 12 volts. And then 300 pure sine wave AC power of consistent power. And then 10 watts of power from your USB ports. So that's a lot of power you can pump out from that. Not to mention, if you get like I did, you can get this bad boy, which allows you to hook up your wall outlet, 2 wall outlets of the same ability, or even from the Sharper 50s or such forth, all into one prong from 4 ports. So 2 outlets and 2 solar outlets, or say if you have solar and wind, you can plug it all through here as long as it's around 15 to 16 volts of power. I mean, that's incredible, and you can have that consistent power going through it. Say you have 2 5-amp wall outlets, which the Yeti 400 will be able to take. You can keep that plugged in and use the Yeti like basically a wall outlet system, and it won't decrease the power output. So it'll basically work like a UPS, except when there's no home power, it automatically will switch to solar. And excuse me. Woo. Random. Anyways, it'll automatically switch to solar, and you basically will not have any kind of dis disruption of your power output. And these also work as a very unique UPS system. So even if you do lose uh, home power like this, there is no power difference. So it automatically switches over to battery power without any kind of flicker or any difference in power output. And then once power comes back on, recharges and gets back to full, boom, simple. And then so yeah, you have that flexibility. And with the 1250, you have more DC power output versus with the 1400 or even the 3000 that they're supposedly coming out with, because you have 3 DC ports plus another DC port, which is the Anderson port. And unlike the 14 and 3000 lithium systems, the 1250 lead acid version, again, you can chain another couple of batteries to the back of it, and the Anderson 12 volt DC port is actually rated at 400 watts of output compared to the DC Anderson port from the lithium version, which is only rated at 120, which I find completely stupid, but yeah, they did that. So you can basically chain a 400 to your 1250 because it has that much power output. So you can basically recharge your Yeti 400 like that. So yeah, I mean, it's, or if you want to use, like, say, other components that take more than 120 watts of power, because I know there's lots of 12 volt devices that take around 150 watts to 200 watts of power of DC output, and I mean input, and having 1250 have that output ability without having to rig it to the battery like you would do for some other batteries, is very flexible right there. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, with the Yeti systems, the only real thing the only real reason you would buy the lithium version is for lightweightness. That's the only thing. Well, besides the higher surge ability from the Yeti systems, besides the surge and the lightweightness, that is the only thing at the moment. Girls, Girl Zero, Goal Zero halves for the current lithium systems at the moment. So, is it worth a buy from a lead acid battery system? No. For my ability, no. I don't see any benefit from that. I mean, sure, they're lighter weight and they have a higher surge, but for consistent usage and whatnot, unless you're using a chainsaw or a drill, plug-in drill, plug-in chainsaw, plug-in stuff like that for your ability, then yeah, go lithium. But if you're using it to power your house or something like that just needs consistent power, lead acid batteries are better because they're more flexible. They have a more higher DC current output, and again, they're chainable. I mean, sure, they are heavier, but sometimes you're not really going to move these batteries around unless you have to do it a lot of times. But even for the 400, it's only 30 pounds. I mean, that's not very heavy. I mean, even a basic guy that's not even working out can lift that. So it's not really that hard to lift these kind of batteries. And another thing about people are going around saying that this and this and this and this and just whatnot. People are gonna say on this video probably the same thing they say on other videos, that oh, you only can discharge a lead acid battery down to 50%, because if you discharge it fully, then it's gonna ruin the battery. That is actually false. That myth is only for flooded lead acid batteries. AMG lead acid batteries has fixed that problem and made it more rigid and durable for power output and recharging ability. That's why they call them deep cycle batteries. They've been deep cycled lots of times to perform more better than a flooded lead acid battery. So these can go far down below than a flooded lead acid battery. So these can be drained and discharged to 0% and recharged back to 100%. The only thing you do not want to do with any kind of battery is leave them dead for a long period of time, because then you're going to have an issue with having it recharged to 100% again. But AMG lead acid batteries can be discharged to 0% and then recharged to 100%, just like nickel metal hydride, just like lithium, etc. The only kind of thing that you do not want to discharge less than 50% or such forth is flooded lead acid batteries, the ones you would find commonly for use of cars. And most of the time, people actually do not go by percentage for flooded lead acid batteries. They actually go by voltage. You should not see the voltage drop below, I think it's around 11 or 10 before the battery starts having an issue. Because if you have it discharged too low, then the acid inside the battery gets too less, and then recharging it gets too much, and then that causes more gas to build up inside the battery, and that's where you get the expansion. And if you think these happen to have the same issue, I've never had an issue with my lead acid battery here, which is an AMG, ever exploding or anything like that. So use pretty much the correct voltage and whatnot for your battery, and you won't have any issues. I know a lot of people say, oh well, AMG batteries also will expand too and have blow up issues or bubble issues and whatnot. Yeah, that's because people are sometimes stupid and they decide to put rig system on directly onto the battery, and they don't know how to charge it. But this, I've charged it left and right, discharged it left and right. I even ran a little 330 watt full desktop PC off of this for 2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours. Now you're probably all wondering, 330 watts, doesn't this only have 80 watts of performance power and 160 watts of surge power? Yes, but most computers nowadays have a wattage decrease system built into them. If you have Windows 7 Plus, then they have a power saving system built into them that decreases the power need. So even this little tiny system can run a desktop computer, but it will run it at probably about 80 to 40 watts of power. But it will still run it. That means it'll just run like a laptop at power saving mode, but it'll still run it at full capacity. So you'll be able to play your games, but not as fast as you would from having it directly on a wall outlet. But still, for 2 freaking hours on a full-size desktop computer system, that's actually pretty freaking amazing. And I never expected this little tiny thing to do that. So yeah, So there you guys go. And right now I have a bunch of other stuff plugged into it. And like I said, I just showed you the 4-prong system that I got right here. So I have 3 outlets at the moment plugged into it. Excuse me. I have one of the Yeti 150 power outlets, which is 3 amps. And then 2 of the Sharp 50s, which is at 1.5 amps. And for everybody's wondering, these are rated at 15 volts, I believe, and this is rated at 15.3 volts. So there's not much of a voltage difference. But I am getting pretty much about 6 amps of power, and this requires 5 amps of power. I don't know why Girl Zero sells most of their power wall outlets with lower ampage compared to what they can take. Like the Yeti 150 can take 5 amps. Why don't they supply 5 amps of wall outlet power? I don't get it. Because, yeah, they only supply a 3 amp for a 5 amp input power ability. And for the Yeti 400, they only supply a 5 amp when it can take 10 amps. Same thing for the 1250. It can take more than 20 amps, yet they only supply a 5 amp input. So it's like kind of redundant. But either way, having this little adapter, 2 outlets, 1 solar and 1 wind, holy cow, you'll be powered for good. And like I said, these work like a UPS, so even if you lose power from all the sources, switch into battery mode, easy. And even if you're using more power than what's coming in, compared to other power sources, this will still use what's coming in, but it will only take a fraction of the battery power that's being taken. So if I'm using say 100 watts of power, 120 watts of power, but I'm only getting 100 watts of power, then I'm only taking about probably 5% of the battery. So, yeah. Anyways, thanks you guys for watching, and peace out.